And we're back. Now I can finally get on to the part that I want to talk about. So what I'm talking about, in case you missed the first half, is today is 3 months since my very dear Latin teacher died, and I was going to make a video, and it's also 3 days before the beginning of the International Congress for Celtic Studies in Utrecht. And because my Latin teacher was, well, she believed that everything is united in some way, I thought that what I would talk about is a united spelling system for Celtic. Now, the previous video that I've just made is an absolutely awful ramble about my thoughts about what spelling is, but now we can get actually down to the brass tacks. So, Celtic spelling. One of the most remarkable features of Celtic spelling is that the beginnings of the words change. And one of the most difficult aspects, for example, of when one is trying to learn Welsh or Cornish or Breton, that is the three British or Britannic languages, is this constant changing of letters at the beginning of a word, even though that the word's the same, that the word is referring to the same thing as such. Now, this thing here, they're the authors, and they're all wonderful people. And there's the link if you want to see. So, for example, just to take an example from Welsh, these unmutated sounds, the letters P, T, C, B, D, G, M, L, L, and R, H, the sounds that they refer to are P, T, K, T, K, M, and R. One will notice actually that what is spelt as B, D, G in Welsh are actually unaspirated voiceless stops. And this will be important for my own spelling recommendations in a while. But that then these unmutated, what are called radicals, remember of course radix in Latin means the root, the origin, so that this root sound, this beginning sound, can undergo soft mutation and become an unaspirated P can become an aspirated P can become an unaspirated P, which Welsh people probably think of as a B, but phonetically it's not. Anyway, a P can also become, you can see it there for yourselves, you can read it, but basically this has the effect, the fact that the radical letter can change into all these different things make it very difficult to recognise a word, because one, for example, doesn't know when one sees B, D, G, or is it F? Yes. No. Yeah, well, anyway, for example, for BDG, whether the BDG is a radical of the word, is unmutated, or whether it's a mutated form of the soft mutation. Basically, the radical sounds of Celtic basically would be much easier to. What I'm going to propose in a while is that it would be certainly always easier to leave the radical sound. You'll see this in a while. Here are the radicals of Celtic. Now, when a sound is softened, what I would recommend is that whether in Goidelic, so Scottish, Irish and Manx, or in British, that is Welsh, Cornish and Breton, that what they both undergo soft mutation. But what I would rather call, actually, in Irish, it's the traditional term is séú, softening. I would rather call it actually scoile, loosening, because what you are doing is loosening the articulators, the parts of the mouth that make the sound. In Irish, at least. Anyway, so for example, a loosened or softened P, when it becomes more like a vowel, it goes up the sonority hierarchy. It becomes a F in Irish, and actually I should write that as a diaphoneme because it could be either palatal or non-palatal, or rather I-like or non-I-like. Whereas in the British languages it becomes phonemically at least a B, a nasalized P, the nasal mutation, or roo as it's called in Irish. Eclipse, usually is a term for the Irish. I would spell it like this. Again, you can see that the sounds are very different, but that the underlying source is the same. And then for you can pause the video and look at that, you know what I mean. And then the aspirated mutation, or which often isn't even considered a mutation in Irish. Basically, this is so chevu is to give it an awful description of the spelling, is nowadays a H after a consonant, and although is a H before a vowel. In Irish, aspiration only affects vowels, whereas in the British languages, and without going into the details of them, because I'm by no means an expert on them, an aspirated P becomes an F, whereas it stays as B in Irish. Again, a softened T in Gaelic becomes a H, if you like, whereas a softened T in the British languages becomes a D. A nasalized D in Gaelic becomes in Gaelic becomes D, whereas a nasalized T in British becomes NH, or at least in Welsh. And so on. Sorry, I'm going to have to run soon, so I'm going to try and get through this quickly. There's aspiration there. Now, I actually don't think there's a need for the dot over those letters, but that would needlessly complicate things. I don't have time to talk about it now. There are some examples. So in Paris, that's the way it's spelt in Irish at the moment. You can see that this word in, for example, in both the we'll say Irish and Welsh, causes the nasal mutation. Irish, it's easier to spot what the Irish maintains the radical letter, whereas Welsh doesn't. Now, one always knows that an MH is derived from a P, but still, Paris, sorry, this is a proposed spelling, but it might not actually work. Someone can point out the flaws. It has to do with the vowels, I won't get into it. Basically, what I would recommend is that keep the radical spelling, and I would also propose that words that can be stressed be spelt with capital letters, but there are ways to avoid that as well if that looked too strange to people. So here again, the same word, so in a tooth, without going into what the old Irish tooth was, basically a tribe of sorts. Basically, both languages, or all 6 languages, could use this spelling. Again, the Gaelic speaker knows that a nasalized T is to be pronounced as a D, whereas the Welsh speaker, for example, knows that a nasalized T at the start of a word, sorry, a nasal. Am I right in that? Why did I write a? Oh, sorry, I mixed up my examples. Oh, for feck's sake. What am I talking about here? Oh, yes, sorry. Am I right with that? Indeed. Yes, sorry. NH. And then, so in a cat, for example, again, the nasalized C becomes a G in Gaelic, but it becomes this aspirated in heart in Welsh. Here are some other examples. So my father, for example, this is the current Welsh spelling, and my recommended spelling is written in bold. Van had. Now, I am absolutely no expert on any of the British languages whatsoever. But actually, I should say, as it occurs to me, that probably the most interesting and seemingly the only sensible spelling reform that I've seen for Breton, for example, or for any of the British languages, is by Stephen Hewitt. Now, I have the utmost respect for him, though I do slightly disagree with the fact that he says that we should stick to, or that Breton should, because it has a long tradition of its own spelling, that there can be no question of starting from scratch. I very respectfully disagree. But I'll put his article in the description box. So, for example, a nasalized M, they both stay as M in Irish, both as L, blah, 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 sorry. Now, okay, this is important, and I'm going to have to run in about 10 minutes, so I might make 3 videos, but the next one might be in a couple of days' time. Or a week's time, 2 weeks' time. Anyway, so the greatest step and the simplest in assimilating or making the spelling systems of the Celtic languages more similar would be to write the double stops of Proto-Celtic, that is P, P, T, T, K, K, B, B, D, D, G, G, along with M as double letters, right? So to give a very simple example, the word for battle. In Proto-Celtic, the word for battle was katus. Now, now I'll show you examples later on. But basically, in Gaelic, that has become cath, or in Old Irish it became cath, I'll put it that way, where the T became a voiceless fricative, whereas in the Britannic languages, it became the T became a D, basically, cad. But both languages know that, so the Gaelic speaker knows to read it one way and pronounce it ca, for example, in most dialects of Irish, and the British speaker knows to pronounce it, well, in Wales and, well, yeah, cad, for example. Same goes for blah, the word for flower. So basically, that is single T becomes softened, because that's just the reality of what happened in Proto-Celtic. Sorry, this is getting very rambly because I'm getting panicky now about having to leave. Whereas the double T in Irish survived actually in northern dialects. So, for example, go and listen to the Doegen recordings, Doegen, I'll spell it there for you, and listen to the speaker from County Derry. You'll hear her long consonants. So brat in Irish, cloak, brat, whereas it become brath in Welsh. Cat, or cat, cat nowadays in Irish. Well, basically all those spellings would do for the word cat in all the Celtic languages. This word for stick, although SL, well, that is a slightly more complicated history. Anyway, sorry, I'm going to fly ahead there now. Okay, so there's more than one advantage to spelling. There's more than one advantage to spelling words like this. Recognisability, that is between the Gaelic languages and the British languages. It also better represents, for example, dialects of the north, in the north of Ireland, that maintained these long consonants that existed in Old Irish, as I believe. So one can clearly hear these long consonants, for example, in the speaker Eilish Nícherkin from County Derry. It shows the relationship between the long stop consonants, P, P, T, T, C, C, and pre-glottalization, that is the placing of H or a glottal stop. That sound between the before a consonant. This is important for Scottish dialects. So one finds this convention especially in the Gaelic of Scotland, of course, where basically one could think of it that the first of the double consonants, continuous, basically the sound H has become H. Sorry, I'm going to skip that. Yes, so for example, what has happened basically is that PP, TT and CC in some Scottish dialects has become hup, hut, hook. So basically HP, HT, HK. And it wouldn't at all surprise me if this is how these PP came to be pronounced as F in the British languages, TT came to be pronounced as th, with subsequent changes, and CC came to be pronounced as H. So basically, what first happened is that we got HP, HD, HK, and then this changed into the H itself changed into so basically it changed into its corresponding fricative. So a bilabial fricative before bilabial stop, coronal, voiceless coronal fricative before a voiceless coronal stop, and a voiceless velar fricative before a voiceless velar stop. So basically, and finally, that these lost their stop, their final stop parts, which left only this only the fricative survived. So it's improbable that I'm the first person that has suggested that this is how those things came, but I'm not well read enough on British languages to know whether I am or not. I presume not at all. But anyway, as regards Sax Virla English, it is interesting that it is from words with a short vowel and a double consonant in Old English. So for example, cat with a double T is where English gets most of its words that have a short vowel and a short consonant nowadays. I'll make another video sometime about my spelling recommendations for English. It's more of a mess than any of the Celtic languages, of course. But English, this is also the way that I think that English that the word cat should be spelled. Okay, I'm going to have to stop. Okay, because I'm going to have to run. Which is a pity, because I have a lot more to talk about. I know this video is crap, but I'm going to put it up anyway for the day that's in it. Yeah, you can read that yourself. So for example, just the Welsh word for cloth. So for example in Welsh, it's usually in borrowed words that, so if a Welsh word ends with a P, T or K sound, that's usually a sign of a borrowed word. So the Welsh word for cloth is currently spelled like this, CLWT, pronounced clut. What I would spell it as is this with a H, and I have good reason for that, because of course if it were a single stop, that would have become clued. If that, for example, if this were a Proto-Celtic word, that would be pronounced clued with a D, but then to unvoice that D to a T, you would require a H. But this happens synchronically nowadays in Welsh anyway. So there are particular advantages to spelling like this. So, for example, the word for poor, tlawd, from the Proto-Celtic tlaw, where we get the Irish word tlaw from. Whereas in the superlative, sorry, the comparative, poorer, it's tlotach, where the D becomes a T, and that's because actually the underlying suffix is actually this H, which devoices the T. And then the same thing in the superlative, the most poorest. So again, there's the root with the H, which causes the aspiration of the T, tlotav. Same thing with the word fair, which this is the way that the word fair is spelt in Cornish and Welsh. In Breton, it's spelt as take, T-E-K. Unfortunately, they could all use the spelling T-E-C. And this is the spelling I have here in bold. Again, the same thing. So, pronounced as, well, you can see here, teg, tekach, tekav. You can see that in my spelling, what's actually going on. First of all, better shows the pronunciation, and also preserves the morpheme. Now, sorry, I know this is very boring. I'm going to have to stop there because I'm going to have to run. So I'll put up the other bits. There's another, Jesus, for sure we're only halfway through. Okay. Slán go fáilín. It might be about 2 weeks, I'd say, before I get to put the other parts up, unfortunately, but I'll see what I can do. You might spot me at the International Congress for Celtic Studies in Utrecht, so feel free to accost me there. Slán.